On a flight where luxury was reserved for the elite, one passenger faced an unexpected test of dignity and respect. Maya Daniels, a black woman, was calmly seated in her rightful place in first class when she was met with shocking treatment from a flight crew. What happened next was not just a fight for fairness. It became a story of resilience, justice, and a twist that no one saw coming. Before we dive in, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. If you love inspiring stories of strength and justice, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more impactful stories like this one. Chapter 1. A flight that should have been simple. The airport buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Travelers moving with purpose, families hustling through security, and business professionals clutching briefcases as they talked into their earpieces. Amid the hum of engines and the shuffle of footsteps, Maya Daniels moved with quiet poise. Her long camel coat flowed behind her, a leather tote in one hand and her boarding pass in the other. She didn't just walk, she glided, her presence commanding attention without needing to demand it. Her sharp brown eyes scanned the departure screens, even though she already knew her gate by heart. Maya was no stranger to airports. As the CEO of Aeromax Airlines, one of the most successful airlines in the world, she had taken countless flights, often to oversee operations or close billion-dollar deals. But this trip was different. This time, she was flying not as an executive, but as a passenger seeking rest, a rare break from the pressure of running her empire. Aeromax was her pride and joy, a company she had built from scratch. It was more than a business. It was a testament to her grit and vision. And today, she was flying on one of her own aircraft. As Maya approached the first-class lounge, she handed over her boarding pass with a warm smile. The attendant barely glanced at her before waving her through. Maya noticed the brief flicker of judgment behind the woman's eyes, a microaggression she had become painfully familiar with over the years, but chose to let it slide. She picked her battles carefully. Inside the lounge, polished wood and leather chairs offered sanctuary from the noise outside. Maya settled into a corner, sipping a fresh espresso and flipping through a novel she'd been meaning to read. For a fleeting moment, peace returned to her world. When her flight was called, Maya rose and walked to the gate. But something in the air shifted. Smiles became forced, politeness became stiff. She noticed. She always did. At the boarding gate, a young man in a perfectly pressed uniform took her boarding pass. His eyes darted to the first-class indicator, and surprise crossed his face. "Right this way, ma'am," he said, poorly masking his disbelief. Maya gave him a gracious nod and stepped through the gate. She reminded herself that she had faced worse. People like him often thought wealth and status had a specific look, and she didn't fit their mold. Chapter 2. The microaggressions multiply. The first-class cabin gleamed with quiet luxury. Plush leather seats, personal screens, and a curated menu awaited the lucky few who could afford them. Maya took her window seat and adjusted her silk scarf, staring out at the tarmac as the hum of the engines whispered promises of escape. Her tranquility was short-lived. A flight attendant approached, blonde, with a sharp expression that bordered on hostility. Her name tag read Lindsay. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. "Can I get you something to drink?" Lindsay asked, her tone clipped, devoid of any warmth. "Just water, please," Maya replied with a polite smile. Lindsay nodded briskly and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Maya exhaled slowly. Maybe Lindsay was having a bad day. Maybe it wasn't personal. But deep down, Maya knew better. Experience had taught her to trust her instincts. As the other first-class passengers settled into their seats, Lindsay returned, distributing noise-canceling headphones. She smiled at each passenger as she handed them out, until she reached Maya. Then, Lindsay hesitated. Her eyes lingered on Maya, as if calculating something. Maya kept her voice steady. "Could I have my headphones, please?" Lindsay's lips curled into something that might have been a smile in another life. "Those are for first-class passengers only," she said, slowly and deliberately. Maya blinked. "I am in first class," she said, gesturing to her seat and her boarding pass tucked neatly into her jacket pocket. "Of course you are," Lindsay replied, sarcasm dripping from every word. Without another glance, she turned and walked away. Chapter 3. The moment that sparked the storm. For a long moment, Maya sat frozen. Her fingers tightened around the armrests. She could hear the murmurs from nearby passengers. A woman across the aisle, a white woman in her 50s, caught Maya's eye, her gaze filled with sympathy and outrage. Maya drew a deep breath. She'd spent years climbing the ranks of an industry that had tried to shut her out. She knew injustice when she saw it. But today wasn't going to be another day where she let it slide. She pulled out her phone. She wasn't about to cause a scene. Not yet. But she also wasn't going to let this go. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as the plane taxied toward takeoff. Maya's hands were folded neatly in her lap, but inside, a storm brewed. Chapter 4. Small acts, big consequences. As the flight leveled out, Lindsay returned with a beverage cart. She stopped at Maya's row, poured a glass of water, and set it down with more force than necessary, causing a few drops to splash onto Maya's scarf. "There you go," Lindsay said with a tight smile. "Thank you," Maya replied, her voice calm, refusing to give Lindsay the satisfaction of seeing her flustered. But when Lindsay moved on, her demeanor brightened. She bent low to refill the water of an older white man in the next row, laughing at something he said. The difference was impossible to ignore. Maya sipped her water, tasting the faint metallic tang. She set the glass down carefully. She knew this wasn't about customer service. It was about control. Lindsay returned again, this time with the headphones card. She handed them out to the remaining passengers with a cheerful, "Enjoy your flight." But when she reached Maya, her hand hovered uncertainly. "May I have my headphones now?" Maya asked, her voice polite but firm. "I'm sorry," Lindsay said with exaggerated sweetness. "We must have run out." Maya glanced at the cart, still half full. "It appears there are plenty left," Maya said evenly. "They're reserved for passengers who pre-requested them." Lindsay shot back. "It's standard policy." But it wasn't. Everyone in the cabin knew it. Chapter 5. The Turning Point. Across the aisle, a man cleared his throat. He was middle-aged, in a sharp business suit. "I didn't pre-request mine," he said loudly. "And I received a pair." Lindsay's composure faltered. She turned pale. "Well, that's different," she stammered. "Ow!" the man pressed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly the same." There was silence. Lindsay stood frozen. Then, stiffly, she picked up a pair of headphones and placed them on Maya's tray table without a word before retreating down the aisle. Maya slipped the headphones over her ears but didn't turn them on. Her mind was already at work, calculating her next move. Chapter 6. The Power of Silence. The plane's cabin lights dimmed as they prepared for landing. Lindsay avoided Maya's gaze, and the passengers whispered among themselves. But Maya's calm wasn't an act. It was a strategy. As the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, Maya remained seated. She waited as the other first-class passengers disembarked. Then came the moment no one expected. Chapter 7. The CEO steps in. A tall man in a Navy suit boarded the plane. His presence immediately commanded attention. It was Richard Vaughn, the airline's president and Maya's direct report. He approached Maya. "Ms. Daniels," he said. "May I have a word?" "Of course," Maya replied, standing and adjusting her coat. Lindsay stood in the galley, pale and tense, as Richard approached. "Lindsay," he said quietly, "you are relieved of duty. Effective immediately." "What?" "Sir, please," Lindsay protested. "You'll have a chance to explain yourself in front of HR," Richard said flatly. Two security officers stepped forward. Lindsay was escorted off the plane, her protests fading. Chapter 8. Justice with Purpose. Later, in the terminal lounge, Maya met privately with Richard. "This won't be swept under the rug," Richard promised. "We're revising our policies. We're doubling down on unconscious bias training." "Good," Maya said, "but I'm not interested in a temporary fix. I want systemic change." And she got it. Under her leadership, Aeromax Airlines rolled out a comprehensive inclusivity program, transforming not just their customer service, but their entire corporate culture. Maya's story didn't end there. She was soon invited to speak at global conferences, using her experience to inspire an industry-wide movement toward equity and respect. Epilogue: The legacy of a moment. Months later, a young black woman boarded a flight. She was greeted warmly, handed headphones without hesitation, and seated in first class without judgment. She smiled, knowing who to thank for the change. Maya Daniels had turned one moment of injustice into a lifetime of progress for herself and for everyone who came after her.